My name is Jumoke Hinton Hodge, and I'm a part of Oakland Unified School District Board of Education, represent District 3, and also just have had the pleasure over the last year to really work with folks on state of education in Oakland, SOBEO. So I feel like my general experience in Oakland has been a Black mother raising Black children, and had the honor and privilege to raise three stepchildren who had moms, and so that in this blended family situation, and each one of those young folks needed something different in their educational process. As a family, just who they were individually, there was different ways that we had to approach the education of, two Black boys and, two Black girls. So that's been my experience first as just a parent and a supporter of, quality education. Well, definitely I got engaged in the political side of it through really, frankly, through the organizing side of it, and around feeling like I was doing social change work that was really necessary. Quality of schools were not so great. The district was being taken over. And one of the things that I noticed was that in these conversations about recovery or saving the district or, improving what was going on, really, quite frankly, the advocates and the voices were not the voices of Black families. They weren't really at the table. And so that was kind of just my first effort to say that, one, we need to have this information and we need to understand what's happening with our school district as power was shifting and changing. So that became just, a space for me to actually talk to other Black parents and say, hey, we need to understand this and know what's going on. So not just advocating them for my child, but the children that were sitting next to my child. What's my best memory of being a Black student, parent, or advocate? So I actually want to start a little bit with me. That I went to private schools throughout my whole K-12 and into college experience, and so have been in PWIs, predominantly white institutions, all my life, right? And so oftentimes I was that one Black student in the class. We were laughing the other day talking about the fly in the buttermilk. I definitely had that experience. And so sometimes I had voice, sometimes I didn't have a lot of voice. Sometimes it was really good that I was there because they would say some stupid stuff. And I'd be like, nah, you don't get away with that. So I have this sense of being a child, being a Black person, being someone who was in an educational system, that sometimes you were invisible, and sometimes you were working sometimes a little bit harder, or just kind of being in a different paradigm that didn't always embrace you. Because of that, it was really important for me. I just had this thing around, my child is going to go to their neighborhood school. I'm not commuting all across town. They're going to go to public school because I didn't get to go to public school and have that experience. And so all my kids went to African-centered schools, so they started out in that space. So I feel like that was a real commitment as well around getting, engaging and grounding them in their identity, who they were, strengthening them, so that knowing that things were going to be reinforced at home, of course, and in community and family and church. That was important, but so then when they went out into the world, right, they had a sense of who they were. So, I think that kind of commitment to all of my kids around African-centered education is really important. And then my last fun story about my daughter and I, because of this whole thing around walking to school, right? So she walked to MLK, and it was straight down Myrtle Street, and we had a cat named Akiri that would actually walk us up until Market Street for 2 blocks and walking me and her to school. So that was cool. How I might define the state of Black education for educators themselves. I think, Oakland is, again, very rich with history and a sense of Blackness and an identity of self-determination. And so I see, teachers being and educators being in that tradition very much so, right? Like this is a space where people, the first, teacher, African-American woman, Dr. Ida Jackson, taught at Prescott Elementary School in West Oakland, was connected to a community of people in Oakland that were educators and just like the intellectuals, right? So I just think that there's an incredible legacy around Black educators here. However, though, we are reflective of like a white supremacist system, so we're still like majority white women teaching inside of our school system. We still haven't necessarily broke down the barriers, right? We haven't graduated enough Black children to come back and teach in our systems. We haven't made the profession one that is truly honorable and doesn't like burn folks out and they feel like they're making a real contribution. And so I think, again, we have an incredible legacy and perhaps need to organize our teachers in ways that they're actually doing a lot more to interrupt the system so that they can be healthy and so that they can really inform educational practice in Oakland for all children, right? White children, Southeast Asian children, all those children need to benefit from a Black educator, for sure. Wow. I'll definitely, the state of Black education, and now, definitely for students and then also for families. I'm going to start with families simply because I believe that, like, when I think about families, when I think about, communities, right, it's like, our families make up these communities. And so I know how I got engaged in the whole educational process and wanted to work in schools was because I wanted to be able to connect with families about any and everything. I wanted to talk to them about their health. I wanted to talk to them about, whether or not they were thriving, whether or not they were doing the right things on behalf of their children, whether or not they were like secure in some ways, right? So like real community building, community development type of work, and knowing that like families bring so much to the table. Not just like I'm showing up to take my kid to school, right? You also show up with perhaps issues and concerns around like how my child does learn, or issues and concerns about like the quality of my housing. So I think families in Oakland right now are like taxed. I mean, they're struggling, like the displacement stuff is real. Being able to hold on to places to live, family transportation issues, right? Because families are like trying to get their kids cross town to get them to a quality school, and kid tends to be late every day. But it's about this sacrifice I'm trying to get to. And so I think families struggling quite a bit. I'm excited about some of the empowerment and movement of some family organizations and people that are coming together that are really about educating themselves. And I think that they're going to have an opportunity to interrupt, and that is like reach. I think that they're a really critical organization to be speaking to with families. I'd love to see, maybe some more affinity work with families. Like, what does it look like for, Black fathers to show up in certain spaces around education? Like, what is their voice? What is their need in terms of, ensuring that there's quality education for our kids and Black folks? So, like, what are those different kinds of voices? And to students. Again, we know that our students are really struggling. The data pieces kind of point to, right? They're not reading really proficiently. They're not doing mathematics proficiently. And that's a shame. Like, our children deserve better than that. I am definitely of the mindset of how can we push back, blow up the system in some kind of way that young people could actually be really very much at the center, right? Like, and we talk that, but I don't believe that Black students are at the center of anything when it comes to thinking about curriculum design, when it comes to thinking about, what's your staffing structure, what it needs to look like, what is the actual coursework, what is the physical setup and of the space itself, how should the space be organized, and to think about that through the lens of a Black child, I think is critical and really important. So I hope that more young people, and again, this SOBEO work, if we can dig in and really partner with young people, is like, how can they begin to articulate some of those things? And we help them, lean in, because in some ways you're like, oh, I just want to think about the teacher. No, like, let's think about your whole experience of this school thing. Do you need to be in that building to actually get educated? Like, what are the things that we can help, just young people challenge a little bit of the system and be able to articulate what it is that they really need and what engages them in learning. So I think what I would want people to know about the work that I do around race equity and what I think, why I do it, and what I believe they need to do alongside of me in doing that work. It's really critical, because we live in a white supremacist system, right? We live in a system that is like really set up to engage and support not us. It is very true that you can see in some of these schools and these spaces that Black lives don't matter, Black minds don't really matter, and there's evidence of it. And so it becomes really critical, yes, to have someone to have the voice. Unfortunately, I can be marginalized, right? I can be the angry Black woman. I can be the one that's emotional. And so it is important for me to actually do my own work around that. So I guess, what I say to myself is get better at having the skill and the ability to articulate and push back on this system, so that it is done in a way that, yes, sometimes is fueled by emotion, but it is also like intellectually based. It is also based on like what is good from the heart in terms of doing this work, what is morally correct around doing this work. So being able to have the language and being able to speak to that, it's uncomfortable, and I think everyone's got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't think our silence serves our community or it serves our children in any kind of way. And I'm not Pollyannish around, let's all get together and, it's going to be this unified voice. I don't believe that, actually. I think that our Black community is so incredibly diverse, and there's ways in which we need to lean into that, right? So there are going to be some people that are going to they're going to blow some stuff up. They're going to move at this in a very revolutionary type pace and tactically. And then there's other people that are going to be working inside the system to kind of do this. The bottom line is that we need to be really clear about the advocacy, unabashed, very, very clear about we shouldn't even be using the word equity without saying race equity, for example, right? Let's not whitewash it. Let's not, soften it in some kind of way so people feel comfortable, right? What are the needs of Black children? What are the needs of Black educators? How are we failing Black children and Black educators? Who's going to create, I think, opportunity and remedy and healing for us in our community? And, while we may do that with some allies, it's really our work to do for us, by us. What is inspiring? I want to be positive. However, I just want to go ahead and name the challenges, right? So we have some real challenges about us living here, about employment, about, joy, like the factor of are we a happy people in this city, right? What are our challenges? And so I think, so I think about the inspiration kind of comes from, do we have to rethink some of the ways that we think about how we live, right? Do we need to be thinking about that in a more co-op or, expansive way around making sure there's generations of us that are actually going to be able to accumulate some wealth and be able to purchase some things? Are there ways in which we should be building community differently because there's these challenges? And so what are we collectively doing together to support some real change? Should we be building our own schools? Should we be making some commitments around who's going to show up to manage certain types of things, who's going to be out there advocating in some way. So I think that, again, there's, the inspiration is really just opportunity for me. I think that we've done a lot of analysis, and it's cross-generational, right? I feel like I could sit in a room with a 20-year-old or 30-year-old, 40-year-old, and I'm 54, and there's a through line, right? We can talk about generational gaps or whatever, but there's a through line about what my experience was and what other people's experience was and what we believe could be solutions to this work. And so then at that point, like, how do we share? How do we learn from one another in that work? Because I want the messages to be clean and crisp. So my expectation is that a 20 and 30-year-old is going to carry a vision that looks really different than mine, that I need to kind of get behind, and yet at the same time I know that parts of it will actually help articulate what I need and what would be satisfying for me. So, I think in that, solutions is, there is some collective work that we need to do in kind of recognizing our strengths, our weaknesses, what's relevant, right? Like, for real, like, I'm just in that space around, it's not about my vision anymore. Like, I think I have a cool vision. I think there's some things that I still want to work towards and build, but I have got to be grounded in what is relevant today in 2018, or what does someone see for 2030, right? Like, is that really the projection that we should be having at this particular point? And who can see that better? Who can feel like they can experience that in a different kind of way? So, all of us, again, supporting each other to have a vision, to be healthy in that process, and then collectively, like, getting out the way sometimes, or showing up how you need to show up. To support the real. So, and bottom line is we need to build institutions. So, we need our for-profits, our nonprofits. We need to have houses. We need to have basements. We need to have storefronts. We need all these places to kind of be as a footprint in this community as we get kind of pushed around. There's got to be physical spaces, I think, in some ways, and there's got to be organizational structures and frameworks for us to always be able to plug into the work. My name is Jumoke Hinton Hodge, and I've been a part of the SOBEO narrative series.